Hello YouTube, it's DasGregor, and guess what? I'm not in Gen 2. Now first off, I do want to apologize. I have been messing with the sound, and I cannot seem to get rid of that hiss. Hopefully it's not too distracting. I have done some things, it just doesn't seem to work. Anyway, I'm just happy because this is LFS. For those who don't know what LFS is, Linux from scratch. I wanted to do this because a couple months ago, some people were talking to me in different chat rooms, asking me about source-based distributions, and if there were alternatives to using Gentoo. I had looked at a few in the past. I even did a review on Crux a few years ago, which I really liked, and it seemed to be okay. And I tried to review it, or at least look at it again recently. I was able to get i3 running and get some basic functionality, and it was okay, but it's just not as smooth as Gentoo. There were a couple others that talked about looking at Lunar, and so I looked at Lunar. I was able to install it and get it at least to a command line. I started setting up the system. To me, the use flags and some of the things that Lunar uses, it just doesn't make sense to the way I think. And I don't know if it's because I've spent so much time in a Gentoo world that sort of thing, you start thinking inside one box. And it's difficult then to get out of that. And honestly, the Gentoo wikis, the instruction that is out there on the web to assist you with Gentoo is so magnificent, so awesome, that when you run into a program, I don't want to diss Lunar. To me, they're just not at that maturity level that Gentoo is at, because their documentation just isn't there, and there's so little that's out there. Now, I got past the redundancy issues I was having. What I was pretty much getting to was that I was trying to install a desktop GUI, but some of the packages that it was requiring were just failing to install, and they would require something else. And I was trying to use default settings, and nothing just was working. So I was really getting frustrated because Crux was a loss, Lunar was a loss, and I said, I have not tried LFS in at least 3 years. Let's try LFS out. And as you can see, I have a working desktop. Now, this system that I have it on is about an 8-year-old Core i5 system, and it's not very powerful. It should take me 3 or 4 days to build LFS. I have sound working, I have video working, I have my webcam working. I've got wireless networking functioning, XFCE installed. You can tell by the video, the screen's not very good. I don't care for that, and I think it's just not powerful enough. And because of that, I'm getting out of this screen, and we're going to go over to this other screen, as you see the big Chrome icon. And let's go to our first page here. I've kind of set up a few tabs of things I want to talk about. First off, we are running Linux from Scratch version 8.1. You can find this at linuxfromscratch.org. I am at the Read Online. You can also download this as a PDF so that you can look at this. I did install it on bare bones hardware. If we go into the stable LFS, which is what I ran, this is a book, and anybody can follow this book. Now, I used the Gentoo Live DVD image to boot into an environment that I would be able then to set up the LFS structure and build LFS. That I found because Gentoo already has everything built into it for building source code. It already had all the tools I required to be able to build this with a bare minimum that I needed. It was a good way to get started, I felt. They, in the past, have said they've suggested different live settings you could use. They also suggest that you start inside an OS and work your way from there. I have a problem with that because if you screw up anything while building, you could end up screwing up your current operating system. I didn't feel like trying to do that. I have done it in the past where I have actually put LFS side by side with Gen 2 on a partition. I've installed LFS in the last 3 or 4 years, maybe 2, 3 times. This might be the 3rd time, I believe. I wanted to really try it again to see how it works. Now, like I said, anybody who can read a manual and follow instructions can install Linux from scratch. It's not difficult, it's just time-consuming and very, very tedious. And you have to pay attention to all the small details. But if you really want to learn Linux and you want to know the mechanics from the ground up, how did Ubuntu or Slackware or Debian get to how it is? This is a great way to learn this. And to me, it's not a functioning, you're going to use this for 6 months to a year type OS, because to maintain it would be a nightmare. But to run it and learn it and see how Linux truly is, that is a great way to do this. If you just start at the forward, you learn about what type of audience they're looking for, the target architectures. You just go through all these things, and then you get into part 1 about how to build the LFS system. It talks about the host system requirements, the stages, the creating new partitions. It walks you through everything that you would need to do. And I would suggest the first time you do it, if you're really that afraid of doing anything, start it in a virtual box to test it out and see how far you can go. And then if you ever have any hardware that you have extra, try it out. Use a live DVD such as Gen 2 and work your way through. Now, the thing about when you install Linux from scratch is that you have to first construct your temporary system, which gets you pretty much what used to be in Gen 2, like a stage 1 tarball, where you download just the bare tools to start off, and you would actually build your whole infrastructure first, and then you'd work your way up to the stage 2, then stage 3. Now Gen 2 throws down a stage 3 tarball, and you don't have all that mess that you used to have, say back in 2003, 2004, when I first started doing this. I had to install Gen 2 almost the same way that you would install LFS. So feel lucky that they have made this to a point where you don't have to do that with Gen 2. But with LFS, you'd construct your temporary system. You've got to get all the tools and everything working right. And then once you build that, then you have to rebuild a lot of what you did up here as a temporary build into the new system so that you can get into it and use it. So you have to do things 2 and 3 times. And there are things where it talks about, for instance, if we go into the GCC, as you can see, it gives you everything you need to type in. It gives you stuff that you need to be able to do. It explains why you're doing it and what you're doing, and it gives you how to set up your prefixes, how to make it, how to do the checks. Now it says in this section, the test suite for GC is considered critical. Do not skip it under any circumstance. Some of these tests can take hours, but if you don't do them and you've screwed up something, you can waste days if you do it wrong. So I suggest you follow the rules, you follow these steps. Everything that you see like here is telling you what to do, how to do it, why to do it, what it's doing, and it explains to you. So it's an excellent way to understand the basics of Linux, how the system works, what works together, and really grasp the fundamentals. Now, if you just want to use Linux, LFS is not for you. Just go grab your latest Ubuntu or Debian or Slackware and install it, and don't worry how it lays it down and how it operates. This is for those who really want to understand how things work. And the other thing that's really neat is once you've done all this compiling, once you've gotten everything down and laid out, it then teaches you things like setting up the different files that mean something and what they actually do, setting up your virtual terminal, setting up your hardware, getting your devices to be able to boot, checking out all of the things that make it run and make it work. Creating your FS tab, putting in grub and how to set up the boot process. And a lot of these tools and things that you learn, you can bring into other aspects. I learned so much from LFS that helps me then with Gentoo. For instance, you don't have to use the automated grub setups. In fact, they tell you that they prefer you not to do it. But they give you information about setting up grub, about the naming conventions. They talk about the different things about getting this set up for master boot record or how you're going to do it. And then it gives you a basic way to set up just a basic grub file. And you don't need all that extra, I call it gobbledygook, that you end up when you use the grub install tool and it creates this huge configuration file that you have to sort through a lot of stuff. You don't really need that. I've used some of this within Gentoo just to edit my own grub config and get things to look a little bit nicer in some cases. Now, when you get to the end, it is not the end. If you successfully boot into LFS, you will be at a command line with absolutely nothing. And you say, DasGregor, why? Why would you even consider such a thing? Well, that teaches you how much work just goes into setting up LFS just so that you can get to a command line interface. It may give you a little bit of appreciation what a lot of other developers do for you. That's when you have to move on to BLFS, Beyond Linux from Scratch. Now we're at the BLFS version 8.1 as well. It matches LFS 8.1. And if we go into here so that we can see everything, it talks about the different revisions, and then we jump into all the important stuff. Now, you're not going to install everything from BLFS. This is where you can start picking and choosing what you want to do. A lot of times people want to be able to first set up security. So you go in and you install some things like OpenSSL. I'm sure I installed a few other things. I know I put in the GNU TLS, but some of these do not show that I've gone into them just because of the order that I've done it and when I got the browser that I'm using. And you will notice that I am using Chrome because I just threw it on there to try it out, see if I could figure out how to do that because it's an interesting way to install. And I'll be going over that in just a little bit. But you will see that all of the packages that you'd ever want are listed here, and you just start with what you want to do. You might need to work about wireless, for instance. So you look in here and you find the wireless networking stuff. If you want to add programming, and each one of those, it tells you what you want. So for instance, if you wanted to make sure that you had a Python environment, if you went into Python 3.6, it shows you where you can get the file. It says additional downloads for the HTML documentation, for instance. It recommends that you install libffi. Now, one thing that I always did with LFS was if it recommended it, I grabbed it because I figured it's got to be important. And then you have to think about these are optional things that you can install. And sometimes they'll tell you what you want, like GDB 8.0 required from some tests. Well, I wasn't going to do any testing, so I didn't install that. And Blues, I believe, is for Bluetooth. So then you can decide whether or not you need to install that functionality or want to build it with that. And then you'd have to go to those. For instance, if you're doing the recommended, you then click on here. It will take you to the recommended. It then tells you the package stuff. It says optional, DasGregor. Well, okay, well, that's only to run the test suite. Well, we don't give up that, so we could just go ahead and install this. Once we install it, we go back and then get this one. The thing is about Linux from scratch is that you can easily dive into a rabbit hole that just jumps into another one, that jumps in, and the next thing you know, you're 10 dependencies deep, which also require dependencies, which also have required packages, recommended packages, and optional packages. And I'm going to pause right now. I feel a cough coming on. So when you install those packages, you end up going from one to another, and it can be very tedious. In the long run, though, it is well worth it just to say that you've done it. So once you've installed everything, you decide what you want, you look at all of this here. You're going to need DHCP if you're not going to set up static. You've got your network programs here. You want your wireless tools if you want to try to get Wi-Fi working. You're going to want to get WPA supplicant if you want to use encryption for that. Yeah, there's a lot of different things that you can go ahead and get. The net tools, for instance, are really handy. CIFS tools, if you're going to be looking at file system shares. I've got this pretty much fully functional with all this, but you pretty much start with what your basics are, what you need to do, and you just go one step at a time and take it. If you keep going down here actually into the 20s, you can see here's the X window system, and then you just follow the directions. You start off with the introduction to Xorg, and then you work your way through the whole chapter, and by the time you're done, you have at least Xorg working, and then you can decide on whether or not you want to file a window manager. And they don't have i3 here. I thought about looking and just downloading i3 and installing it separately, but you can go to KDE section and install the KDE. Yeah, they do have the GNOME set up, and they also have XFCE, which is what I set up because it was the lesser of all of those others, other than going to LXDE. But I'm a little bit more familiar with, of course, XFCE than those. You can even do LXQT. So you have some basic instruction on how to install some of these, and they give you all the links to everything you need to do. It's a lot of hard work, but you learn so much from doing LFS. Now, I installed for a browser SeaMonkey. Now, I've used SeaMonkey a long time ago in the old days, because SeaMonkey was an all-inclusive package. It had your mail client, it had your browser, it had FTP. It was kind of like what Mozilla was back in the 90s in regards to a full suite of everything you need, and it gets built all together. As you can see, as we're kind of going through here, you can see the mail news clients, text, web, and so forth. I was looking for the regular browsers, and I wasn't seeing it. Let me see if I can do a quick search in here. Because graphical web browsers, there we go. When you start looking at some of these, such as if you wanted to do Chromium, one thing it tells you from estimated build time is 94 SBU using 4 threads. SBU is a level of measurement that they use about how long it takes based upon the processors and such. 94 SBUs could take forever. You can see the download size is 513 megs. It's going to take up 5.9 gigs of space. Here's some required patches that it needs to fix some problems that it has. And that's one nice thing that I find very useful for LFS is when there are patches that are required, it gives them to you right away. It tells you within the installation how to patch it properly. It gives you all that good stuff that teaches you about patching. But here's the problem. These are all the required items for running Chromium. And so I'd have to go through each one of these and install them, and each one of these might have dependencies of their own that are required, or they might have some optional things that you want to look at. So much to deal with just to be able to get that particular program running. And then if we look at some of these others, for instance, let's go with a light one, Midori, for instance. Midori says that the SBU is only 0.8. Well, that's awesome. But it has a required WebKit GDK. So let's look at web. Oh wow, 56 SPU for GDK with using parallelism of 4 threads, and then it has an estimated 120. That's going to take forever. And then you have all of these other requirements for WebKit. It kills you. So that's why, when I was looking at that, I decided to go with SeaMonkey, because if we look at SeaMonkey, 15 SPU, and if we look at the required, also lib isn't bad, AutoComp is super easy. We've already installed the GDK and GDK3 for other programs. We already had Unzip and Zip and Yasm, and all of these ones, these don't take hardly anything at all to install, so it made it really easy for me just to go ahead and get SeaMonkey. SeaMonkey actually took the longest, and it still took 15 SPU was like 2 hours for me, 2 to 3 hours. So if it was 2 hours for 15, just imagine what the 94 would have been. Once we did that and I got into SeaMonkey, I then went to the Chrome browser. We downloaded the Chrome browser. And somebody asked me, how do you install Chrome in LFS? So one of the first things you do when you download the Chrome browser is you get this file here, Google Chrome Stable Current AMD64.deb. Well, you need to be able to extract that. To extract a deb file, you need to use the AR tool. So you have to make sure that you have that downloaded and installed. When you use the ARX to extract it, you're going to get these 3 files, Debian binary, control, and data. So if we go into here, let's see, we're at root, so we want to go to downloads. We do a search there. Now we do AR and Google Chrome, and we wanted to do an ARX. Why don't you guys do that? There we go. And if we do an ls now, we see that we have data.tar, control tar, and that Debian binary file. Now, if we go ahead and use our standard tar commands, x, v, f, and p, and we go ahead and just open up the data tar, that's going to put the /opt Google Chrome. We now do a search. We see we have user. That's interesting. I was listening to a live video of Irish, and he was like, people complain when I say user. I have always called that user. Yes, it's USR. But you know what? I figure if it's in lowercase, it's normally short for user. It's normally... People say Etsy. I feel like that's kind of silly, so sometimes I go etc directory. You know what? That's a personal preference. That shouldn't really matter. And if it gets you all wound up over how someone pronounces something, you know what? There are so many different accents and ways that people say things. You got a problem if the way somebody pronounces something is different from what you say, and it gets you all wound up. We'll just leave it at that. So, I call it the opt directory, not the OPT, because it's short, I believe, for optional. So, anywho, once we do this, we've got this, and if we do an ls of opt, you'll see there's Google. And so, what you want to do at this point is you want to sudo and you copy -r opt to /opt. And what that will do is move, or actually copy, everything you need for Google into your opt directory. Now, I've already done it for this one, so we're just going to get out of that. And we're going to go into opt. And you'll see that, you know, when you install and set up LFS, it actually has you install Qt5 in the opt area instead of in anywhere else. So if we go into Google, all of our stuff is there. We've got Chrome. There it is. But we're not done yet. So you have everything you need right here to run it as is. But then, if we go back to our download area, and we look at user, or USR, we will see that there's a bin directory. And inside the bin directory is a shortcut. And if we do a little -LSA, that tells us that Google Chrome stable points to opt Google Chrome. Well, it's important to have that because it makes it easier, because you don't have your search directory looking in this, but you do have a search for your binaries looking in the user bin file. See, everybody says bin, but that's short for binary. So you can do this one of two ways. You can either create this manually, or you can also use that sudo command and do the user, and don't forget the -R, and then move that stuff to user. And that will put that in there. Now you say, oh wait, Dosh, you had another directory. What was that? Well, if you look at that, etc, user, share, you'll see that there's app data, applications, doc, a few things, node control center, menu. These are all things that are going to create, for instance, if you look at the applications area, your Google Chrome desktop, and some of the other stuff. So you'd want to go ahead and just move all that into your user area. If you had installed the Debian file, it would have done that for you, and then it would all be good. Make sure you use your super user abilities to do that. Once you've installed the opt directory and your user directory, the etc one, I don't see a need for it. It's creating a cron job, and I believe what that's doing is starting Chrome automatically, which I don't like anyway. I don't like it always running, so I ignored that portion of it. And that's all you pretty much need to do. Once you do that, you can then go into applications in the internet, and you'll see that there's Google Chrome now available inside of here. Now, I also wanted, because Dirk is really big about getting away from Firefox and those browsers that steal your information and spy on you. And so Basilisk is another great alternative. So I downloaded Basilisk, and Basilisk is found here at basiliskbrowser.org. Now, I thought this might be a good way to live, in real time, do kind of the same thing for Google Chrome, except with Basilisk for LFS. So I've already downloaded the tar. I've already expanded Basilisk. So if we look at Basilisk, we see it has all our applications. There's nothing else. There's no user, opt, etc directory, etc. So what we want to do here is we want to do a cp-r basilisk to /opt. And of course you want to do the sudo. Put in your password. Oh. What's wrong with my password? Oh, that's right. The way I have this set up, instead of putting in my super user password, I gotta put the password in for DasGregor, and that's why I was reading the screen. There we go. Now, if we look at opt, we will see we have the Basilisk directory, the Google, the Qt. We did not have that before. And we need to do what this sort of did with putting in the user bin directory, a link to the Basilisk. So if we go to /opt and Basilisk, we see that it has should see anyway, find where that is. That's not it. I'm blind as a bat. I've always wondered when people are watching videos and you're searching for something, it's like you don't see it, and yet I see it immediately on the screen and I'm looking at somebody else's video. But whenever I'm searching for it, I can't see it either when I'm actually talking. It's goofy that way. So we see that there's Basilisk and Basilisk bin. So we want to start off with the Basilisk. Just to make sure that everything works okay, we're just going to go ahead and run Basilisk first. And it gives us an error. I wonder if I'm missing some items. Okay, well, it went ahead and opened. We're not going to use that just yet. So I wonder if that's close all tabs. I wonder if that's just a one-time thing or if that happens every single time. Oh, it's just a one-time error. Okay, good to go. All right, so we know that that works. But now we need to make our link. So do an we want to do this as super user too. Sudo ln-s, and we want to make our link, and I'm always getting confused about this, so I'll be right back. Okay, to make that link, and I'm sorry, I always get confused with links. I need to really learn that better. But the best way to know that for me is to go into where you want it to be, for instance. And so we want to go into user bin, and we want to create that link to the Basilisk. So we want to do a sudo, because we want to make sure that this has that capability, ln-s to make a symbolic link. And we want to remember where that file is. So it's opt basilisk, and we want it in the current directory, which is why I say it's easier just to do it that way. Dot. Failed to create some file exists. Then I did it wrong. Because it already exists. Did I already do it? ls basilisk. But I don't see it. Yeah, that's all in that. I did something wrong when I was trying it out. And of course, sudo. I apologize. I hate screwing up when I'm doing my videos. Alright, so now that's gone. So let's bring back that command. Now it's good. LSA Basilisk. And now we see that Basilisk is pointing to opt Basilisk. That is correct. That is right. So now that we have that, we should be able, for instance, to just be in here, and if we start typing Basilisk, we should be able to open it even from here. And it should work. And now that we've done that, we won't see it in our menu just yet, but it is available to us. And we can actually go into web browser, and we can change our application. So we can say other, and we can go ahead and put in Basilisk if we'd like to set that as our default. So we can either do that by doing user/bin/Basilisk, and that sets that up. Just minimize this for a short time. We don't really need this anymore. Minimize that for a while. And since we did that, we set up the web browser. Now, web browser should be Basilisk. And there we are. We have Basilisk running. So, very simple to do that in LFS. So, you don't have to use all the programs that LFS has. You can just set it up and use it through here. And that is pretty much it. I'll tell you guys, I really like how much LFS has taught me things. I still have to learn this stuff. Linking files is not something I do on a regular basis. It's something I wish I knew more of. Bash is so strong, and the command line is so strong. There are so many things you can do within that. It would be pretty neat to see if, while I still have this to try out i3, in LFS. That being so much light as a window tiling manager and all that, it might be better than using XFCE in regards to the resources that are on here. But as I can see, this video is already at 35 minutes, so we will go ahead and end it for now. If it's morning, evening, noon, or night, whatever you're having, I hope you enjoy it. LFS is a great learning tool. Check it out. Don't be afraid if it looks daunting. Just take it in little pieces. Try it in a virtual box at first just to see how it operates and get started. And just compile a few packages every night. It might take you a month, but think of it as a very long journey that will teach you many, many things. So, enjoy, guys. Bye.